we're home. I know it doesn't look like much, but I think this is going to be a great new start for us.
So, congratulations on the movie. Yeah, I loved it to bits. Really enjoyed it. So, I mean, the first thing I wanted to say is to you, this is something that you wrote, I think, on an Instagram post. You're a petrified pregnant mummy again. Was that out of choice? Was that deliberate?
No, I think I just have a body type for I got those childbearing hips, baby boy. I don't know. I have no idea, but I will take all the mommy roles for sure.
As long as they're petrified ones, no?
Yeah, exactly. As long as I'm scared. As long as people realize that being a pregnant mom is so horrific. Just kidding.
Oh, it can be. From my experience, anyway. So, but on a serious note, but I mean, the first thing I didn't expect to read at the beginning of the film, but it said inspired by true events. So that kind of, a lot of times you see that and you don't expect it to be, it's just kind of there to scare you. But this really is something that really did go down. Obviously, I don't want to spoil too much of the film because a lot of these inspired by true events, it kind of spoils what happens towards the end. But can you kind of briefly explain how much of that was based on real events and how much you had to kind of dig into to maybe investigate things or maybe speak to your family? Because I know that you probably felt quite related to the story, no?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you don't have to do very much digging, I think, to kind of understand like what's going on, because this stuff is still very common practice, unfortunately, in certain areas. But yeah, when you do the research behind like the eugenics project and people who see others as second-class citizens or, not up to their standard in, I mean, just like, to be honest, like race is just like, it's just such a crazy concept to think about when someone actually feels like this sort of elitism because of the color of their skin. It's wild. I mean, that's why I think I resonated a lot with the story and the character. And just kind of like her journey, because I think a lot of people, a lot of Latinos at one point in their life have experienced some sort of racism, whether it's subtle or overt. I grew up in, I think, a very like sheltered community because it's 70% Latinos. White people assimilate to Latino culture, like right. Everyone's so it's a very interesting dynamic, and I didn't have the understanding, to be honest, when I was younger, just how like prominent like racism and just this like racial division was with like certain communities, and to also just like state, we live in one of the best times ever, as far as like being a woman, as far as being diverse. I mean, this is one of the best times. It's just, I think there's still more work to be done. And when you do the research, I definitely think like it's heartbreaking. But there is something very hopeful about how much we've grown, I think, from the 60s and 70s to now. Being brown, being Black, being Asian, like these things are cool now. Like when my parents grew up, they weren't even allowed to speak Spanish. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like it's such a different time. So it's exciting to know that we're moving in like a much more positive and inclusive direction.
And something that I was kind of curious was that I think you, and I'm not sure if one or two of the writers, they're both from Texas. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, which is so rare. I mean, that's like one of the coolest things. But Ryan is from El Paso, so that's a border town. I'm from McAllen, which is another border town in South Texas. And then our writer, Marcela, is from San Antonio, which is like 3 hours north of where I'm from. Mm-hmm. So it was very Tejano heavy, which like for me, I'm just like, but yeah, I think Ryan kind of shares like a similar thing as far as just wanting to make sure that these stories are told. And to me, it's one thing to always be playing like an immigrant character or like this, poor Latino family, whatever. The most interesting component and like, I feel like nuanced element that we had was really this investigation of identity within the Latino community. Because like Ryan and we are, I think, second generation And it's very different than like our grandparents or our parents. They're not just Mexican. So he is, Spanish speaking culturally, like there are distinct differences. But if you ask a white person, we're all Latinos, we're all the same. And when we sat down with our director, even our DP, who was Hispanic, so he's from Spain. I mean, we all speak Spanish, or we're working on it, and our experiences are so different. The level of fluency in Spanish, whether you spoke it in the home, whether you had like a weird discontent for your own culture, or whether like you preserved the culture because that's all you knew. I mean, it was very interesting to kind of have these two characters, Diana and Beto, compare their experiences, and that's similar to what I think a lot of people to this day, whether it's a second generation or someone who just immigrated here, can kind of relate to as well.
Can't believe you left LA.
It all worked out. The baby comes in a couple of months.
You're first?
Yes.
How are you feeling? I got you this. It's very important for new mothers to be protected.
Did you know the woman who lived here before us?
Apart from the fact that they kind of saw people who didn't speak Spanish as outsiders, they were stronger believers in. I mean, like your husband in the film, Tenok, he believes more kind of what they believe of this curse that's been placed on women. No, is that something that was very rife back then, or maybe still is now? And does the film portray that very specifically as it is or as it was back then?
Oh, yeah, these rituals are still very much common practice, depending on what Catholics you talk to. I mean, just the other day, I think my sister was sick like a month or two ago, and my mom did like the egg ritual. She put it underneath the bed, not underneath the pillow. But yeah, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, my grandma, my dad took me to my grandma's house because I had nightmares, and she, it's based on like a lot of times like this very like religious, it has like a religious origin, but it seems a little, brujeria, like a little supernatural, however you want to say it.
Witchcraft,
but a little witchcrafty.
I don't like to use that word. Yeah, I know what you mean, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a religious component, but she said like some prayer in Spanish, and she put these like branches underneath my pillow in the shape of a cross, and then my nightmares went away. So like, I do think it's interesting because a lot of people find it to be, especially nowadays, like maybe not as like modern, or just kind of like, oh, those like silly things. But you'll also find a lot of, especially, our grandparents or even our parents, do believe in like the ojo, do believe in some of these slightly witchy things.
I feel like I'm seeing things.
Dizziness, hallucinations, rashes.
How long have you had this?
What?
So, I mean, I know that Ryan was adamant that the film really felt like it was a 70s set horror movie, as if it could have been filmed back in the 70s. Did he sit down with you specifically and kind of tell you how he wanted to do that, and how he wanted you to address it maybe in certain films that he'd like you to watch and those kind of things? Yeah.
There were several films that he like recommended. I mean, I watched Carrie. I think, and The Shining, but I think The Shining was in the 80s, like 1980, so it's definitely not a 70s movie. One of the technical things about movies during that time, rather than me thinking like, okay, be in the 70s, it was more just more work for him and the DP, to be honest, where they just had longer drawn out scenes. So as opposed to it being kind of like modern day shooting where you have just really, really quick
like
scenes.
A video, flipping out music video.
Yeah, it was more so just, there was several scenes where we had maybe like 4 minutes of like just straight up dialogue. Like there was no interruptions. We were like having the camera move around, and that's something that I hadn't experienced, especially because the last thing I worked on was a TV show. So everything was like, say it fast, say it quick. Okay, next thing. Okay, say it fast, say it quick. Next thing. So that was like, I think the coolest thing for me, especially as an actor. I love just having these like longer drawn out scenes.
Brilliant. Well, it's been a pleasure to speak to you, and I hope to speak to you again sometime in the future. Best of luck with the film when it comes out next week.
Thank you.
All right. Cheers, Ariana.
Bye.
All the best. Bye now.